Did you audition for Jackie's chair?
Nobody ever said this is an audition, but but the press started covering it that way, like who's going to get it. And it got whittled down to like 6 of us.
I mean, have any contact with Artie at all? I ask everyone who joins me here.
Sure. Yeah. I talked to Artie.
How is he? Welcome to this edition of Here's the Pitch. It is sponsored by Massa's Restaurants in St. Louis, 5 locations. stlmasses.com is their website. I'm your friend Brad. And today, very excited. I'm always excited when we get a chance to talk to stand-up comedians. Today, he's sitting down, but that doesn't matter. That is Greg Fitzsimmons. I'm very excited to see you on the other side of this Zoom call. Thank you, Greg.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. You're in St. Louis?
That is home base, yes.
Okay, yeah, that's where my podcast gets produced by a great company called Midcoast Media out of St. Louis.
Well, we'll keep an eye on your website, gregfitzsimmons.com. Again, he's the podcasts, and you were on Howard 101 for a long time, and that ended at the end of December of 2018. That was a long-running show, though, and not many people got to hang on through that long during kind of the changeover over there. How did you hang on, and what happened at the end? Was it your decision, their decision, everybody's decision?
Well, I was there for 10 years, and they were at the peak. There was programming. There was probably 5, 6, 7 shows a day, different shows all week, and then they started. I have no idea. I mean, I don't know who does the programming, but one by one they started dropping shows. John Hines' fast food show. Then the guy who Riley Martin, who had a connection with UFOs, he died. So Jay Thomas died. So one by one, shows were canceled or the people died, and then eventually they just said, you know what, we just want to have only Howard on these 2 channels. I was the last show on for like a year on the channel. And then they said, we just might as well make it all Howard. So that was it. But, I'm on great terms with them still.
I was going to say, you make me think maybe these people, they were not wanting to pay them. So they didn't want to tell them they lost a job. So they had to do something kind of, they offed them, the Riley Martins and Jay Thomases.
Oh, they killed them. Yeah. There was a guy parked across from my house in a red Chevette for like a year. And I always question if he was a serious agent, but no, I don't think so.
You're very famous on the Stern Show because I think it started. I mean, did you audition for Jackie's chair, or were you just sort of coming in? Because there was a time where comedians were coming in, but some people called them auditions. Some people just said, "No, I'm just sitting in." Were you auditioning? Did you have a thought that you might be able to sit there, or were you just coming in going, "I'm having fun being on the show"?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both, because I came in and I had won this. HBO had this comedy festival in Aspen every year, and I won some trophy, and so I kind of got on their radar, so they brought me in to do an episode, and obviously I was nervous as hell, and I didn't know what to expect, and I did it, and it went really well, and so Howard started bringing me in on a regular basis. Like I would come in like sometimes 3 days a week and sometimes once a month. And it went on for a while. And then when Jackie left, they kind of started rotating more. They called it the Jackie chair. And they started bringing more and more people in, guys like Jeff Ross and Artie Lange, Doug Stanhope, Dave Attell. And they started kind of looking at us. Nobody ever said this is an audition, but the press started covering it that way, like who's going to get it. And it got whittled down to like 6 of us, and then like 3 of us. And then eventually it was just me and Artie. It was like me against Artie. And there was no comparison. I mean, Artie was the guy for that show. I'm a fucking married guy with 2 young kids who's sober. And, Artie's coming in on Monday morning talking about how he had a 3-way with hookers in Vegas who stole his money, and he's hungover. And, he's a master storyteller. And he was so great for that show for so long. But then when he got that, Howard said to me, "You're welcome on the show anytime you want to come on." And he was true to it. I went on like 50 times. Every time I was in New York, I would just email. Why am I forgetting his name?
Baba Booey. Yeah.
I would email Baba Booey, and they'd have me in every single time. It was very nice. It was very welcoming.
Do you ever think about what would have happened if maybe, let's say, Artie has some sort of weird meltdown during this audition and then you get the job, and what that would have, do you ever think about that? Like what it would have been like to wake up every morning and be on that show? Or is it, hey, this worked out. People know who I am now from that show, and everything worked out anyway without having to be on it?
Well, being on it takes you to a whole other level. I mean, you know, it's really got a very strong cult following. And I don't know, I think it would have overshadowed, like Artie is always going to be known as the guy from the Howard Stern show. And I think I've kind of crawled my way to the middle of this business, and I've been doing it for 30 years, just kind of existing in this really nice space where I make a good living. I get to do what I want creatively, and I'm not at anyone's behest. I'm not anyone's guy. And so I've managed to always have some kind of project going on that keeps me out there a little bit, to be able to draw at the comedy clubs. But I think it would have been tough to do that job. I mean, it's a fucking grind. You got to get up early in the morning, and you got to be on. And, you know, I'm sure there's office politics that I was never a part of because I was just in and out as a guest. So I think I was relieved when I didn't get it, but it certainly would have been a huge boost to my career.
The way you mentioned that, now that I think about it, it's amazing Artie pulled off 9 years, right? I mean,
was it 9 years? Wow.
Yeah, well, 2002 to 2009. My math might be maybe 8.5. But either way, the fact that he really did show up at least the first 6 years pretty much all the time, and then kind of spiraled.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, he's a workman. You know, I mean, he comes from blue collar stock, so he's like a guy that shows up for work. You know, he may be on heroin, but he shows up. And again, like I that show really needed him at that time because everybody was getting older, and everybody used to go to strip clubs. Like everybody on the Stern show used to live a wild life, and they all got a little bit suburban. And then I think Artie came in, and he was this breath of fresh air.
What do you? I mean, have any contact with Artie at all? I ask everyone who joins me here.
Sure. Yeah. I talked to Artie.
How is he?
He's hanging in there. You know, he's sober. He's staying busy. He's starting to go out and do stand-up again.
He is. Well, now can you tell us a little bit about where would we see him? He's not promoting this.
I have no idea. I don't know.
But he's healthy, because there's this like, oh, where did he go? He's this one little tweet and then he's gone. He was doing a podcast and we lost him. So you're saying he's healthy. You're keeping in touch.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a reporter. I have no idea. You know, I think he's doing fine.
What about that time you guys did Carnegie Hall and you opened for him, right? Was that one of your bigger times to be on stage and just, I mean, probably like a rock and roll show, right? Because Artie comes and it's not just comedy. It's hey man, let's go. I mean, was that one of the bigger shows for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think the audience, you know, look, as Stern's gotten older, the audience has gotten older. So it's not really that circus environment anymore at those live shows. They're like, you know, they're middle-aged guys from Long Island that drove in, and I think they respected that it was Carnegie Hall. I think everybody sort of felt like, wow, this is a big deal, you know. And but I remember Howard walked in. I can't remember whose set it was during it. Might have been mine, but he walked in while the show was going on, and obviously everyone just stopped and turned, and him and Beth walked down the aisle. And everybody cheered, and he sat down, and then it couldn't have been Art. Maybe it was me. I can't remember, but it was a pretty special night. Having been somebody that grew up in New York and, you know, went to Carnegie Hall a million times in my life, and you know, all the famous albums that have come out of there, from, you know, Lenny Bruce to George Carlin and Bob Newhart. You know, to be on that stage was pretty. Even though I wasn't the headliner, it still felt pretty special.
You mentioned many times being on the show, and then, you know, no one wants to be in that spotlight and have Howard, but you asked him to write the foreword for your book, right? And that became a bit. It became a long-standing bit. Was that fun to be fodder for Howard? And how hard was it after asking him to go, oh shit, I didn't realize I was going to have to take this much abuse?
Yeah, it was a big ordeal. You know, I think it got played out as a radio bit. It was, I think people enjoyed it. And then, of course, you get the trolls that, you know, get on social media and start talking shit to you because you're giving Howard a hard time. But I think it was all in the spirit of a radio bit. And I'm still friends with him, and we still text back and forth, and yeah.
You had the other bit with Andy Dick, right? You had to kind of defend yourself after that conversation with Andy, right? I mean, that had to be because he wasn't really excited about what Andy was saying.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about being a roast on roasts. You do a lot of roasts. You did some over there. We talked earlier about not being able to do roast, maybe on Comedy Central anymore. I mean, you don't. This culture is not allowing people to do that type of comedy. But I think you just did one, and just talk about that being part of roast and having to write quick on your feet. Some of those during the Howard show were really hilarious. You took Shuli down. That was very, very funny. Way to bring this way to stop it. I can't do what you did, but it was great. Tell me about that though. Just writing for roast and being part of those.
Yeah, I just did one for Adam Egan, who's the guy that manages the Comedy Store. He moved out to Austin to take over Joe Rogan's comedy club, which is, I think coming soon. And so we all love that guy. And that is the best roast, is when you know the person and you love them and you can do it in that spirit. Because I did one of the Comedy Central roasts. I did the, who was it? Chevy Chase. And no one liked him. He wasn't friendly, and it was a really negative atmosphere, and it was probably the worst roast in history. It's famously a bad roast. And so when it's somebody that you love, like, roasting Andy Dick, who I absolutely love, and, being able to roast Gary and Howard and everybody, that's a great day. That's when everybody's having fun, and you can kind of feel, it's almost emotional. You really feel people loving each other through insults, I think that people get hurt when they don't know each other, because they don't know the boundaries. And so I think that they're still getting a pass, though. I think that the Comedy Central roasts, I'm sure there's people that are complaining about them, but for the most part, Comedy Central is airing them, and they're pretty raw. And I think people get the context of it. And if anyone has a problem with it, they probably shouldn't be watching roasts.
Yeah, exactly. And you wrote for Ellen, famously, someone who is basically getting canceled by her own crew. But at that point, tell me a little bit about those days, because you sort of knew this coming a long, long time ago, that it was not a fun place to work, right? Isn't that pretty much what happened? You decided, I'm just going to not show up. I don't want to work here anymore. Tell me about those days working as a writer and a producer for that show and for her.
Yeah, I have a whole non-disclosure agreement. I'm really not supposed to talk about it. I don't want to get sued over it.
No worries. Do you have a crew of people, like, comedy crew of guys that you kind of lean on, like a Dave Attell, a Florentine? Who are your guys? Like, who do you sort of just kind of banter stuff with off and kind of have that type of crew? Do you have one of those?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't call it a crew. I kind of do my own thing because I'm married with kids. That's my priority in life. And so I go to the clubs and I'll hang out with, at the store, you hang out with like Joey Diaz and Rogan and, a lot of guys you probably haven't heard of, but that are regular comics there. And then on the phone, I talk to Attell a lot on the phone. I was just in New York last week. And I had dinner with Louis, and then me and Attell hung out for a few hours, and it just felt great to be like, I feel like I have really, really close comic friends in New York, since that's where I started. And LA, I've got friends that I've made over the last 20 years, but there's something about those guys you started with that is just more meaningful.
Yeah, and it's kind of a special pact, right? Because I watch a lot of documentaries about comedians. I love the thing on Showtime, on the Comedy Store, and there's that group in the 70s, and then the group in the 80s, and then the 90s, it sort of went away, but it felt like it came back, and then Adam left, as you said. But there is that just special bond between you guys. Not a lot of people know what it's like to just walk up on stage and have the microphone and a light on you for 60 minutes, and you got to go. It's like you can't just walk up there without anything.
Right. Yeah, I think it's I guess it's like if you were in the military on some level. They always talk about how people don't understand unless you've like been to war, and this is like a minuscule version of that. But it's something about it's the singular experience, and I guess if you've done it, it doesn't matter if you're somebody who's been doing it for 4 or 5 years or someone who's done it for 30 years. There's still like a brotherhood of it. And especially if there's guys at your level and you can talk about the manager of this club and what the crowds are like at this club and, you know, doing radio in this town and this guy sucks or this guy's good. You know, we all talk about that stuff.
Who sucks? Besides here.
What's that?
I said, who sucks? Give us, no, I don't want you to have to throw that out there, but yeah, you can if you'd like. You, when we talked, you said you were writing some things. I was just curious if you're working on anything you'd be interested to tell us about and writing anything, writing for any shows. You're always busy. So is there anything you're working on that you would like to tell us about that we might be interested in as you're doing some writing?
Yeah, I did I sold a show to True TV. It's like a comedy game show. And, it's a show that we sold over Zoom, which I was surprised. I wasn't even going to try to pitch over Zoom because who knows what that's like. But then I sold another show over the summer over Zoom. So, you know, I'm getting pilots going, and those are your lottery tickets. You know, every time you sell a pilot, you've got I don't know what the odds are, 20-1 or something of it actually becoming a show on the air. So that's another part of the equation as far as doing stand-up, writing, doing everything is like trying to pitch. And pitching is like stand-up. You know, you just get in the room and you try to make them laugh. And once they're laughing, then you sell them the show because they like you and they feel good. So I think it's a huge advantage as a stand-up in pitching shows as opposed to, you know, some writers are brilliant writers, but they're kind of nerdy and low energy. And I think they have a hard time, you know, kind of impressing the executives.
It's a lot of grinding, isn't it? It just seems like it's never just things are good. You're always grinding, right? I mean, that's what that...
You're always grinding. Yeah, you're always grinding. You got to fucking, you know, and there's nobody telling you to do it. There's nobody that is, you know, holding you accountable to show up for work. So it's like, I've got this office in Santa Monica. It's 5 minutes from my house. I come here every day and I roll up my sleeves. I take some Adderall and I try to write. And some days it works and some days it doesn't. But if I was writing on a show, I would have to get it done every day. So it's kind of a weird feeling of never being finished when you're working on your own like this.
Like I said, you've done over 900 podcasts, so probably 900 interviews. Any one of them stand out more than most for you, or do you enjoy? Has there been a few that you like? Oh man, I really enjoyed talking to this guy. And Joey Pantalones was just on. I thought it's interesting hearing him and his daughter talk. But I was just curious if you have over this time of doing all these shows, a kind of a favorite, a few favorites.
Well, I got there's regulars that I always look forward to having on. You know, Joey Diaz coming on is just like hit record, ask him 2 questions, and an hour and a half has just gone by, and I've been wiping tears from my eyes. You know, he's always great. But I think like maybe I like the old guys. Like I interviewed Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys one time. That was pretty special. And I was told, and I'm a huge Beach Boys fan, and so I was told before I got in the room with him, he was doing interviews with some other people, and we were all getting a chance to walk in the room, and we were all waiting together and walking in the room. Every person was supposed to have 20 minutes. And most guys were walking out after 5 because Brian just answers questions yes and no, and seems like he doesn't want to be there. And so guys were just bailing. But I went in and I had some questions that kind of lit him up. You know, like I had specific questions, and he kind of went like, wow, okay. And we ended up talking for like 45 minutes, and it was tough. It wasn't a smooth interview, but I got some time out of him. And then the other one was Carl Reiner, who I had read. He has 3 memoirs, and I'd read all 3 of them. And so we had just a great time. He was so sharp. He remembered things from like being in the Korean War that like they happened yesterday. And yeah, that was pretty great.
In a couple more minutes, you wrote a book, Dear Mrs. Fitzsimmons. It's a longer book. Tell me a little bit about writing a book, and then now the audiobook is out. I saw on your website, but that was a few years ago, obviously. But just that sitting down, writing that, and tell us a little bit about that time for you, and a little bit about that book.
Well, the book was a collection of letters my mother had saved from my childhood. Every time I got in trouble, because we're Irish, I think she thought it was funny. Her and my dad would laugh about, letters from teachers. And, I used to get arrested for vandalism or whatever. And so I found this shoebox in the basement in the Bronx with all these letters in it. And I said, this is a book. I think this is a book. And so I started writing it, and it became much more about my relationship with my dad, because I realized that me getting into trouble had a lot to do with authority issues that I had that stemmed from my relationship with my dad. And so it got very deep. And it wasn't the book I planned on writing, but I'm glad I wrote it. And it took a toll. It was a rough year. I would never do it again.
Well, I'll definitely let people know that it's obviously available on Amazon. You did an audiobook. You have a stand-up show, I think, this weekend out in California for folks that are out there. And tell me a little bit about, what are you writing about? Are you doing COVID? I saw that you did a little COVID material. I saw a clip on your Twitter page.
Yeah.
I mean, is the set kind of going to be the same for a while here that you've kind of come up with, or are you always working on it?
Yeah, it's a lot of new stuff because the world just changed, and it's very weird to go up on stage and talk about, I was just in this restaurant last week, and people were like, no, you weren't. And so you have to talk about what it was like to be in a pandemic, and it's exciting for me. I love going on stage at a time. Like if there's a big news story, it's always great to go on stage and talk about it. And this is the news story of maybe the century, and we're in the middle of it. So yeah, a lot of the stuff I'm doing up there is about it. People want to hear it. They really react to it. And so, the first half of the show is just about the pandemic. And then the other half is some other new stuff I'm working on. And then, close it out with a couple old bits.
This sucked though, right? It was a terrible year. I never thought that a worldwide pandemic would really bring out all of this nastiness of people. I'm not wearing a mask. It's the craziest thing I think I've ever. I mean, I have family members I don't think I'll ever talk to again, and it's just a weird. Just after a little illness.
Everything's political now, and it's all irrational. It's all emotions. It's all narratives. People don't believe facts. They believe the story that they are living, or that they believe they're living. And it's amazing to see some of the things that have happened in the last couple of years and people's outright rejection of facts and science. It's very hard having kids and seeing them going into a world like that.
Yeah, that is definitely a good way of putting it. I'm going to go ahead and end here. I appreciate your time, but it's gregfitzsimmons.com, Fitzdog Radio, Sunday Papers is a podcast. You're out doing comedy work. Anything you want to mention, or did I miss anything? And do we have fun here on this St. Louis podcast? Yes,
another reason to come to St. Louis. Great city. No, I had fun. I think you nailed it all. I appreciate the well-researched interview.
I appreciate you saying that. You'll get the $50 I told you I'd give you here, right. Hopefully we'll see you again. We'll do this again if you're coming through town, and we'll see what's going on in the life of Greg Fitzsimmons. But I appreciate your time, sir.
All right, take care.